So it's my pleasure this morning to welcome our opening speaker, Mr. Dave Duma, who is the Principal Deputy Director in the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation Office in DoD. Dave has been in that position since 2002, and he comes to, of course, he's been a co-host of this DATAWorks conference for the last 3 years, and including this year, and a very strong supporter of the work that we do here. So we're very pleased to have Dave here, along with our other sponsors, NASA, ASA, and IDA. And Dave has been a very strong supporter of this conference, so we're looking forward to his comments. Dave has a long history of involvement in test and evaluation and the analysis behind that, including during his 30-year career as a naval officer. He was an action officer in the OT&E office. But most importantly, for our purposes here, he was a user. And he was in his service as a submarine warfare officer, including command of the USS Scamp, SSN 588. And if there was ever an occupation that depends on the understanding the reliable and credible performance of systems, it's when you're driving submarines under the ocean and doing very dangerous missions. A mission perhaps exceeded only by being on the top of a rocket being launched into space in terms of depending upon the reliable performance of systems. During his tenure as the principal deputy, he has served as the acting director, I think 3 times now and counting, in 2005, 2007, and then last year for an extended period of time. So he also understands the perspective of the senior decision makers and the kind of information that they need to make decisions, which is an important part of what we do here in our work of analysis, not only to get the technical details of the analysis right, but to be able to present that in a way that the decision makers will understand. So from Dave, we get the user perspective. We get him as a customer and supporter of analysis, a strong supporter of analysis, and the senior leadership perspective. I should say on a personal note that Dave's been a very strong supporter of IDA over the years, and for those of you who were at the statistical tools session yesterday, and we talked about all those free tools that IDA was providing to the community. As an economist, I should point out that nothing is free, and we are able to do that because of the strong and sustained support of Dave and the DOT&E office. So last year, Dave talked about in his closing remarks at the workshop the 7 C's, giving us a nautical perspective, and so we're looking forward to Dave's comments again this morning. So please welcome me or join me in welcoming Dave Duma.
Thank you, Bob. So good morning. Good morning. I want to thank you for being here. Snow in Washington, D.C. is a rare event, and I was told that yesterday we had a packed house, so I thank you for braving that. I know what you're thinking right up front. You're probably thinking, wow, Bob Beeler looks a lot better in person than he does on that poster out in the hallway. Obviously, with the snow, we've had some schedule changes, so he and I have swapped spots on the dais here this morning. My father-in-law used to say the hardest dollar a person ever earned was doing a job they didn't love. And passion is the ultimate motivator. And that's what I see in this group. The fact that you are here braving what we consider bad weather. I know the folks from the Northeast are snickering under their breath right now. But I saw that last year also. I did the closing last year, and we were pulling people out of technical discussions at 5:15 on the last day of the workshop. The passion exudes from this crowd, and I appreciate that, and don't ever lose that. The attendance this year is up. We've got about 250 folks or so. About 1/3 are from DOD, about 1/3 from FFRDCs. about 10% from NASA, 10% academia, and the rest are from industry or other organizations. We call it a workshop, but in terms of size and participation, it rivals a small conference. So I'd like to focus my remarks this morning in 4 areas. How much testing is enough? Man-machine interfaces, quantifying uncertainty and its relationship to risk, and analytical tools. And those are all going to be questions. I don't have all those answers. How much testing is enough? We probably heard it at one time or another. Testing takes too long and costs too much. That's a perception that's out there widespread. I need your help as analysts to help change that perception. And we can do that, I believe, by having a disciplined approach to test planning, a design of experiments with some rigor behind it. I'm not so worried about defending the testing as I am having credible testing so that the information that we produce is credible, believable, and you don't have to go into a great deal of detail at the decision maker level. Now, planning means doing homework. Einstein said that if you're going to solve a problem in an hour, you ought to spend about 55 minutes studying the problem and understanding it, and 5 minutes coming up with the solution. And that's exactly true for test planning also. You need to spend more time planning than you do executing. And it's because we're dealing with very complex systems, or in many cases, systems of systems. The interfaces of those systems are absolutely critical to understand how information is to flow, how data is to flow, and make things work. You know, we think of an artillery system, you think of a cannon and something goes in a ballistic arc and hits a target or near a target. And we used to joke in the Navy about polishing the cannonball. You can polish the cannonball all you want. It's still a cannon, okay? You don't get a lot more by polishing the cannonball, okay? But today, it's not just a simple artillery shell anymore. And it's not just a ballistic arc. It's guided. It's got GPS. It's got fins on it. It's a much more complex artillery piece today than we used in the past. And that's a simple example. We have to understand the environment. Are we going to use it in the cold? Are we going to use it in the tropics? Is it something that's going up into space? That might be a harsh environment. Is it something that's going to go underwater? That might be a harsh environment. We have to understand those things and the limits of those environments and the effects on the systems. We also have to understand the concepts of operations. We have to understand the credibility of modeling and simulation. Are we going to use modeling and simulation for insight, to guide us? Are we going to use it for prediction? Are we going to use it as a data source? Are we going to use it for verification of something? In some cases, we just cannot test everything, and we would like to be able to use modeling and simulation to help us in those areas that we cannot test. But we also want that modeling and simulation to be credible. And that's where the VB&A challenge comes in. We have to understand who's accepting risk. I'll get into this a little more later, but everybody is accepting some sort of risk. Whether you're the sponsor, whether you're the developer, the tester, the procurer, or the user. Everybody has some level of risk they accept. We hear an awful lot, it's kind of like testing takes too long, costs too much. It's one of those buzz phrases of give me the 80% solution. Well, in some cases, 80% may be overkill. In other cases, 80% may not even be close to what you need. Okay? If you're talking about body armor, for instance, or a helmet for a soldier, I'll bet you that soldier doesn't want the 80% solution. Okay? He wants to really have confidence in what's going to save his life. You know, from a strategic perspective, some of the things we're doing for our nuclear arsenal, nuclear command and control, for example, you really want to know that that's going to work if you should ever have to use it. So maybe 80% isn't quite good enough in some cases. We need to understand the analytical methods that are going to be employed. And understanding that as a first step, there's a whole second step right below that, and that is what is the data that you need to accomplish those analytical methods. And after all, this is DATAWorks. It's about the data, right? And we shouldn't be testing for testing's sake. If we have the answer that we need, we don't need to test beyond that. If we're confident in that answer. I've been at places witnessing testing out in the field, and they grab me and say, hey, come over to this trailer over here. I want to show you something. And they show me instrumentation and data that's being collected. And I know what the evaluation plan is. I know what we're trying to achieve in the test. And I'm saying, why are we doing this? And the answer I get is because we can. We're just using up people, time, money on something that's never going to contribute to the answer we're going to give as a result of doing that test. So how much testing is enough? You have to do your homework first, and you have to go through at least those things I talked about, and there's probably 10 more that I'm not talking about, to do adequate test planning to make sure you're focused on what you need to answer the question. My second point was man-machine interfaces. Unfortunately, we have to deal with humans. And humans have two characteristics, at least from my point this morning. They're both intelligent and they're inept. Okay? We need a resurgence in human factors engineering, or human systems interface engineering. I'll give you an example from Apple Computer. They came out with something called an iPod many years ago. And coincidentally, it was about this size, maybe a little smaller, but it kind of fit in your hand. You had a little wheel or buttons to push and a little screen on it, right? And then Apple started making them smaller and smaller. And it's because they could. The technology allowed it. And iPods got to be about that big, okay? And you had to hold it here to read it. There was, you know, it was touch screen and your thumb was way too big. They lost the picture on who had to use it. It was the human, okay? So that's why I say we need a resurgence. You can't ignore the human. The human is a marvelous machine, okay? You've heard of things like a boxer having hands of stone was one of the things that a boxer, that was his trademark, hands of stone. But those same hands can tell when he's peeling off coffee filters if he's got one or two. The folks that do the repairs on your fender benders, and in the Washington, D.C. Beltway area, we have a lot of those. The people that repair your car, when they're putting the Bondo on and that, they don't look for smoothness with their eyes. They use their hands to feel the smoothness before they ever paint the repairs on your car. That's how delicate it is, that same hand of stone. We need to make those interfaces for the humans suit the humans. They need to be simple, they need to be intuitive, and they need to make complexity usable. The best example I can think in recent times is, again, I'll use an Apple computer example, this time a good one, that when they went from programming, or not programming, but the user interface of what was the equivalent of DOS to the mouse and the graphical user interface. I mean, we were all on a road to becoming programmers, to be able to get syntax right and things like that in text. And all of a sudden, with that revolution, we didn't care anymore. All we had to do was point and click. And our lives became a lot easier. We're doing the same things. We're doing a lot more than they envisioned back in the 80s. But that revolution is exactly what I'm talking about. Make it for the user. We have to think about what's supposed to happen when we design a system versus what could happen with that system. Again, we're dealing with humans, right? So we all make personal judgments in real time for the situation right now. How many of you have ever exceeded the speed limit? Okay? Now you know the consequences of that, right? You might get pulled over by a cop. You might get a warning. You might get pulled over and get a ticket, and then you have to go to court and pay a fine. You might get an fender bender because you lost control, and then you got to have your car repaired. You actually might injure someone, or you yourself might be injured. Or you might kill someone, or you yourself might be killed. So there's that risk ladder there. And yet, at the moment you make that decision, you decide it's okay for me right now to exceed the speed limit by some amount that you're comfortable with. 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour. Okay. You make that decision all the time. You probably have made it already today. So what could happen? We developed the Singars radio many years ago for the Army. And once it got fielded, there was a rash of breakage of antennas on a little handheld Singars radio. Why were the antennas breaking? Well, it turns out that the antenna is a great handle when you're using it to pound in tent stakes. Okay? Was that radio ever designed to do that? No. Did it happen? Yes. Why? Because of humans. They're going to use the system in a way in which you never imagined. And you have to think about some of that. You have to build trust with that user. And that requires continual, clear communication. You have to build his confidence in the system. The user has to know, am I screwing this up, or is this system not working? Think about your own desktop computer. What would you rather have? A progress bar that tells you something is going on, and you think, yeah, I asked it to do something, so it's telling me it's proceeding along something. I don't know what's churning on inside, but I know something's going on, and that's what I expect. Or when you click, did it hear it or did it not hear the click? Or how about error messages? Things like, error 753 occurred. Wonderful. So what do I do now? Do I click again? Einstein said, Insanity is doing the same action but expecting a different result, right? So tell the user something. Get that machine interface, something that will help him and not put him in a quandary. And that's all stuff where you got the human at the machine. In the future, that job is going to get a lot harder as we move into autonomous systems and testing autonomous systems where the user certainly isn't present. He may be remote somehow, but how do you build user trust in something he's letting it do what it wants to do? And I'm sure some of you have seen movies that they're generally a comedy, but we're about to live this where they've got a football field and bleachers out there and they're going to show a bunch of VIP generals what this new autonomous weapon system can do, and what, lo and behold, it goes berserk and starts shooting at the bleachers, right? We're about to live that. How do you build trust to know that that system is going to do what you expect it to do? And what are the metrics for trust? My third topic was quantifying uncertainty and its relation to risk. All decisions are risk-based. I talked a minute ago about exceeding the speed limit. That's a risk-based decision, okay? But sponsors are making risk-based decisions, and their decisions are about affordability. Where do I put the money? Do I buy 10 systems, or do I buy 8 systems and a lot of spare parts? Okay. The developer makes risk-based decisions in his design trades. Is it an opportunity to put something new that we've never had before in a system? If I do that, does that satisfy a need that the system really has to do, or is it just window dressing? How does that compare to, well, I'd like to have it? Desires versus needs. Okay. So there's always a core thing something has to do, and then there's trappings around it. Those are all risk-based decisions because they affect cost, schedule, and performance, the 3 major metrics that a developer has to worry about. The tester makes risk-based decisions. We talked a little bit about it a minute ago. The known versus the unknown. How much do I need to know? What can I accept as an unknown? Do I have to test it to get the answer? Can I get some insight by using modeling and simulation, though it may not be the answer? Can I use analysis? Have I tested something similar? And can I use analysis to infer something about what I'm dealing with now? Those are all risk-based decisions. The procurer makes risk-based decisions in terms of the quantity to buy. And some of that's fed by data from folks like you, the availability of the system or the reliability of the system. Do I buy items or do I buy spare parts? Back in the 90s, the Joint Staff said, I don't care about suitability. I don't care about reliability. If it's unreliable, just buy me more. We're way past that now. The Joint Staff has got KPPs for reliability and availability now. So on quantifying uncertainty and its relationship to risk, those people are all taking risks. They all have different points of view. Depending upon who you're supporting in your analysis, there's a couple of common things. You have to communicate the severity of whatever uncertainty you're dealing with. You have to answer, so what? Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it matters a lot. You have to communicate uncertainty for decisions. All decisions are risk-based. You have to communicate the effect of any risk accepted on others. So if the sponsor or the developer or the procurer or the tester accepts some risk, what's the impact on the user? If you say, I want that 80% solution, and you go down that path, and you're talking about body armor, the user may not be so happy. And you have to communicate analytical results clearly, and specifically to non-analysts, to people that don't have a STEM background. If you tell me what the p-value is, I will yawn. Quantifying uncertainty and its relationship to risk, the last 4 things I said were communicate, 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 communicate. Clearly. My 4th topic was analytical tools, and I think that's where this forum shines. Data analytics been around for a long time. From shouting eureka in the Greek, it was data, right? And it was analysis. But it's a relatively new discipline in terms of capability. The computing processing power that we have today has made your contribution far more significant. It's enabling timely analysis. You don't have to go to the basement to do statistical analysis on a mainframe anymore. You can do it on your laptop while you're going from one place to another on an airplane. Okay? One of the strengths of this forum, and Bob talked about it in his introductory remarks, about sharing tools, making them available to the community. This is a team sport. We need not only tools, but we need automated tools. We need to be able to collect, store, retrieve, and analyze data. And we need to do that. Someone may be the collector in the store, or someone else may be the one that needs to retrieve it and do the analysis. Okay? And you have to protect your data. We live in a cyber contentious world, and if you're going to store your data electronically on a database, which is very prevalent today, you need to know that that data is unaltered, that it is the right data. You can have the perfect analytical technique, and if you're using bad data, you're going to get bad results. So you have to have a pedigree for your data and make sure that wherever you store it, wherever you transmit it, that you're going to wind up with the same data on the other end. When we do testing, we have data authentication groups that meet and look at data to say, make sure, yeah, that's good data. We can analyze that. Nope, we're not going to do that. And again, we got the humans involved, so there's errors made in that. Well, that data point's way out there. We'll just throw that out. We won't analyze it. When in fact, that data point may lead to much more information than the massive data that you're really looking at. Okay. Big data. There's probably as many opinions about big data as there are data points. I'm going to give you my opinion this morning. I'm going to tell you it's free and worth every penny. When you talk to people about big data, there are different perceptions. One of the perceptions is dealing with large quantities of data. And that's a data management function. That's part of that collect, store, retrieve process. You have to be able to manage it, and you have to be able to know that it's not being altered as you're doing that. That's a necessary step, but it's not sufficient. That's not the end state. You also need to be able to analyze the data. And to many people, that means analyzing data from multiple disparate sources. And you're trying to connect the dots. So if you wanted to know where I was at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, You could look at my cell phone, and you'd find that, hey, there's a call to USAA, an insurance company. You could look at police records, and you could find that a car with my license plate was at mile marker XYZ on I-95. You could find that there was a tow truck that was at that same mile marker about an hour later, okay, from Joe's Towing Service. Those are all disparate data points, okay? But when you connect all those dots, you can come to a pretty good assumption that I was in an accident at mile marker XYZ on I-95 on Saturday morning. Okay? That's what big data is to a lot of people. We always think of Google or Amazon in terms of big data. I mean, Google has a very simple mission statement or vision statement. I want to collect all the data in the world. I want to organize it. I want to make it available to everybody. So, I talked about collaboration. It's a team sport. Forums like these help that, the crosstalk. I'm doing it this way. I'm doing it that way. Ooh, I like your idea. I don't like your idea. This works for me. It doesn't work for you. That kind of thing. Communicate clearly, particularly to non-STEM folks. Okay? You have to translate the data into something that the decision makers can understand. And the decision makers are varied. I talked about that. And the last thing, stay passionate about what you do. I talked about that at the beginning. That's probably the most important aspect of DATAWorks, is the passion and enthusiasm of the participants. So with that, I'll close. And if we've got time, I'll take a few questions. Well, you're making it easy on me. That's not a plant.
So as an organization that provides you reports with p-values in them, I'm very disappointed that we were making you yawn, but what's your experience in terms of how senior decision makers do like hearing about, because they do want to hear about the uncertainties and the confidence levels. How do you think is the best way to communicate that?
I think the best way to communicate that is not a specific p-value, because they don't understand what that means. They don't know if 0.01 is better than 0.02. The thing of here's where my data is, here's my error bars, my confidence intervals, that registers. People understand that. Translating it into those types of things, and when you're dealing with data, pictures help, graphs help, okay? Because not only does it show the specific data, but it shows the trends, and that's important. One of the things we're trying to do in the acquisition system, it's in the fundamental basic document. It says that we're trying to build systems that provide a measurable improvement in performance. So we have to be able to measure that, and we have to be able to convey that. And that means, here's where we are today. Where were we with the previous system? Were we down here? So that looks like an improvement. Or were we up here or here? Are we... You know, so those trends are important. Okay. All right, thank you.